Hello there and welcome to today's video in which I'm going to be talking about a recent stay that I had in the emergency department in hospital. And yeah, the one thing that would have really helped me, and particularly on the first night that I stayed. So to summarise what happened, I will do it as quickly as possible, but basically I had some prolonged palpitations, and I do get palpitations now and again, but they're always fairly short-lived. But this time I think I hit a rate of about 195, and that went on consistently for about 25 minutes. So it was extremely concerning because I've never had anything like that happen. So Ian and I decided to call an ambulance because I was really lightheaded and my hands were becoming numb with these palpitations as well. So yeah, we just thought it was the best thing to do, really. So by the time the paramedics arrived, my heart rate was starting to come down, which of course was good news, but unfortunately they weren't able to capture that data, which was frustrating. Although we do have a heart rate monitor at home. But anyway, they decided that the best course of action was for me to go to hospital to have some checks done to make sure everything was okay with my heart. So I went into hospital via the ambulance, and Ian follows in the car, so he was able to get home easily. So once I got to hospital, they took an ECG and they essentially put me into a system which is called same day emergency care. So it meant that I had a series of tests with them, and I'd be able to hopefully have a diagnosis later in the evening. So Ian stayed with me for a while, but he obviously needed to get home to Jean Paul, our dog. So I spent a lot of time in this department, very bored during the course of the afternoon. But I was finally called in to see the doctor at about 9 o'clock in the evening, and she said everything looks fine, which was great news. And she said we're only waiting on one blood test result, so I'm sure it'll be fine, but we'll give you a call if there's any issues with that. So I was finally able to contact Ian and he came to collect me. So I was just delighted to be able to get home, to be able to eat and have a shower and get to bed, really. However, just after 10 o'clock, I had a phone call and they said that my troponin levels were really raised, and it's a protein that whenever it's raised in your blood can show that there's signs of potential damage to your heart. So of course this was really concerning. So I went back to the hospital so that they could conduct another blood test to see whether these levels were going to come down essentially in the second test. And the second test did show that these levels were coming down, but they were still at a really high level. So the doctor said to me, I think it's best that we admit you so that we can do a series of tests over the next couple of days, really. So I was admitted to the emergency ward, and gosh, it was really, really stressful because there was just so much stuff going on that I just felt in complete overwhelm, really, because I was in a room with 4 other women, and there's just lots of noise and different lights, and I was just not able to sleep that night whatsoever because I was just so hyper aware of my surroundings, really. I just felt like there was no way for me to dissociate from my environment whatsoever, which is really important for me as an autistic person. I always need to feel that there's a kind of get out from whatever situation I'm in, really. And this could be in mental or physical ways or both. But I was hooked up to an ECG machine, so I literally had to be really close to this machine for the whole duration of my stay in hospital. So the only time that I could disconnect from this machine was whenever I needed to go to the loo, essentially. But whenever I'd unhook myself, there would be this constant kind of bong, bong, bong noise, which was really quite loud. So it almost alerted everybody to my presence, or rather non-presence. And as an autistic person, I often have issues with being kind of observed or perceived by other people. So this was really quite difficult for me. And it would also bong whenever I wasn't kind of breathing deeply enough as well, which was kind of frustrating. So yeah, I just felt like I was forced into being really present in the moment, which I found really stressful. And it wasn't until I left hospital, frustratingly, that I saw a poster that said, if you need an eye mask or earplugs, you only need to ask for them. And I so wish I had been aware of this, because, you know, I don't stay in hospital frequently. It's been 20 years since I was last in hospital. So I had no idea that you could ask for this kind of stuff, really, because I hate being a bother to anybody in life, and I would never ever have asked for things like this, really. I assumed this was stuff that you would have to bring in yourself, or of your own volition, really. So if only I had been offered just these two things, I think it would have made my first night just a tiny bit more bearable, really, to be able to kind of check out of my direct environment, because that itself was really stressing me out. So I didn't get any sleep for the first night, so I was utterly exhausted by the time the morning came round. But I noticed that the other four women in the wards were all kind of talking to each other about their experiences and essentially what was wrong with them. And I found it really interesting, because this was obviously their own way of being able to decompress, really. And they were finding kind of solace in their shared experiences. And as an autistic person, this is the last thing that I want to do or am able to do. So thankfully, Ian came pretty early in the morning for his visit, and I kind of texted him everything that I needed. So in amongst all of this, he brought my kind of iPad and my AirPods and an eye mask and some earplugs for the following night, because I knew I had to stay in another night. So once I had all of this stuff, I was able to feel a bit more kind of well, secure in the moment, really, because I knew that I had ways to dissociate my brain from what was happening within my kind of direct environment, really, because I was finding all of the people around me quite difficult to deal with, really. And later on in the day, I was moved to a second ward, which thankfully was quieter. So there was less activity from nurses, etc. So yeah, that was a bit easier for me, and particularly now having my iPad and stuff, so I could, you know, just dissociate from everything, was really helpful. So thankfully on the second night, I was able to at least have some kind of semblance of sleep. I didn't sleep brilliantly for obvious reasons, but at least I was able to have a few hours here and there. But as somebody with MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome, I have real issues with food sensitivity, so I wasn't able to eat anything in the hospital, which was yeah, really difficult to manage, actually, because I was living on gluten-free crackers and crisps from home, because that's all I was able to kind of manage, really, because obviously you don't have access to a fridge or any cooking facilities in hospital. So my diet was actually really difficult to manage. And this made me think of autistic people with ARFID as well. You know, that in itself is really difficult a condition to manage too. So I don't know, it's really difficult for autistic people in hospital, because we're just not able to access safe foods, really. And another thing I had real issues with was My medicines were confiscated by a nurse, and I have to say, everybody in the hospital who I dealt with was really lovely and just super professional. But there was one nurse who was, yeah, quite abrasive, I'd say, and she basically told me off for having my own medications with me, but I have to have, it's a medicine called sodium cromolyn whenever I eat foods because it cuts down on reactions that I have to food. But this nurse took it upon herself to confiscate this medicine from me, which was really difficult because it meant that I had to kind of flag down nurses whenever I needed to eat, and that in itself was really difficult because they'd invariably have 101 things to do in every moment. So it meant that sometimes or often I'd have to wait to have a nurse come and administer these drugs. And I did think, if I was eating kind of hot food or hospital issued foods, it would be cold by the time that I'd be able to eat it because I needed this medication to be able to eat. So that certainly was a major frustration. And I don't know what the answer is there because I fully appreciate that the nurses want to have kind of full control over what medications you're taking so that they can have a full analysis of your time in hospital. But I think this situation is really difficult when you need medications to have with food. So on the third day, I had an echocardiogram, so that's a scan of the hearts, and I'd also had an ECG for the whole time that I was in hospital, and thankfully they said that there were no kind of real issues with my heart. They think it's likely to be a condition called supraventricular tachycardia, if I've got that right. It is likely that I'll have more of these episodes, but at least I know that they're essentially benign. So I'm just really grateful to know that because, well, both my parents died of heart conditions, so it is a bit of a kind of sensitive issue for me, but I'm just so thankful to, all of the doctors and nurses and healthcare workers and cleaners and everybody that, provide this service for us because I was, yeah, just blown away by their kindness, really. They all, yeah, just seemed really invested in their work, which was, yeah, lovely to witness, really. And I think if I had to go into hospital again, I certainly would not want to do it, but I think it has helped me in terms of my own kind of phobia with hospital because it's something that I've always worried about, and particularly since I've had MCAS actually, because I've often worried about how on earth I'd manage this condition in hospital, but I now know that it is kind of manageable on a kind of short-term basis. So it has weirdly helped me a little with my phobia of staying in hospital. So anyway, I think that kind of summarises everything. I did pop a note on my community page last week to say that there wouldn't be a video because I'd had to stay in hospital, and I just wanted to say a big thank you for all of your lovely comments. Yeah, it's just so lovely to be part of this community and, well, essentially to feel like I have friends out there in the world. So thank you so much for that. I'd also be really interested to hear from anybody out there who has the same or similar conditions and how you go about managing them, really, because yeah, knowledge is power, isn't it? I have been told of a few kind of manoeuvres that I can do if this tachycardia were to happen again. So yeah, I'd just love to hear about your experiences too. So leave those down below. So I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.